On May 23, 1618, 3 men were thrown 70 feet from a castle window in Prague. They survived. One of them was later given a noble title by the emperor. The title literally meant Baron of Highfall. This is the story of the most consequential window in European history and the city that kept using it, Prague, the capital and historical capital of Bohemia. A city that has been, at various points in its history, the seat of the Holy Roman Empire, the capital of an occupied state, a Cold War satellite, and most relevant to this video, the city that invented a specific form of political argument involving windows. Not metaphorically, literally involving windows. The original template is 1419. To understand the 1618 defenestration, you need to understand that it was not improvised. It was precedented. It had a name. Jan Zalewski, Hussite priest of the Church of the Virgin Mary of the Snows. On July 30, 1419, he led his congregation, not a mob, a congregation on a procession through the streets of Prague to the new town hall. The Hussite prisoners were inside. The town councillors who held them had refused to release them. Then, 1483, the Second Defenestration. A political dispute in Prague between Hussite and Catholic factions produces another incident of involuntary aerial transit for city officials. The outcome of 1483 is the one people do not talk about, which is a shame because it is the most interesting from a policy perspective. The 1483 defenestration produced a period of religious peace, the Peace of Kutna-Hora, that lasted 31 years. 31 years of relative stability, extracted through what amounts to targeted political violence. By the metrics available, this was the most successful defenestration in Prague's documented history. Rudolf II, King of Bohemia, Holy Roman Emperor, art collector, patron of astronomers, the man who, in 1609, signed the Letter of Majesty, a document granting Bohemia's largely Protestant nobility the explicit right to freely practice their religion. Rudolf was increasingly viewed as unfit to govern. His family had already begun stripping him of territory. He knitted Bohemia. The letter was the price. In March 1618, the Protestant Bohemian estates assembled to formally protest the chapel closures. They petitioned. They argued. They presented their legal case based on the Letter of Majesty. The emperor's administration rejected the protest. May 23, 1618. Hradčany Castle. The Bohemian Chancellery. Count Thurn stands before the assembled Protestant nobles, and the 2 governors Jaroslav Borsida of Martinus and Vilém Slavata. Behind them, the windows. The trial proceeds. The formal charges: violation of the Letter of Majesty, specifically by ordering the closure of Protestant chapels. Both men are given the opportunity to present their defense. Their defense is recorded, evaluated, and found insufficient: 70 feet. That is the distance from the 3rd floor window of the Bohemian Chancellery to the ground below. The fall takes approximately 2 seconds. Neither of those seconds is comfortable. Payoff on the 3rd open loop. The Protestant estates threw the governors from the window and then immediately wrote an extensive apology explaining their action. This is not a small document dashed off in the adrenaline of the moment. It is a formal legal argument, structured, referenced, presented to justify the act as legally and morally defensible under the terms of Bohemian constitutional law and the Letter of Majesty. Both sides understood immediately what the survival of Martinus, Slavata, and Fabricius meant strategically. 3 men falling 70 feet and walking away was not a neutral fact. It was a theological statement waiting to be assigned. What the men actually did after the fall is documented and does not require theological interpretation. Martinus and Slavata crawled away. They found a ladder. They climbed it and escaped. Fabricius followed them. All 3 made it out of the castle and eventually fled to Vienna, where they reported the defenestration to an outraged Ferdinand. Payoff on the first open loop. What happened to the 3 men after the fall? Martinus eventually became the royal stadtholder of Bohemia. Slavata escaped to Saxony, continued his political career. And Philip Fabricius, the secretary who had the administrative misfortune of being in the room when the trial concluded, Baron von Hohenfall, Baron of Highfall. A noble title that is, in the literal sense of the phrase, a permanent receipt for having been thrown from a window. Payoff on the 4th open loop. Both sides immediately began gathering allies. The Catholic Habsburg position. The Protestant estates had committed an act of violent rebellion against imperial authority. The Protestant estates' position. They had exercised their constitutional rights under the letter of Majesty. The ordinary people of Bohemia had not attended the May 23 meeting. They had not voted on the defenestration. They had not written the apologia or printed the pamphlets or started gathering the armies. They had been subjects of the Kingdom of Bohemia, living under the constitutional arrangement that the letter of Majesty had established and that the Habsburg governors had begun dismantling. The 30 Years' War ended in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. The settlement did not restore the pre-war status quo, which no longer existed. It established something new, the principle that states were sovereign within their own borders and that external powers, including the papacy, could not interfere with a sovereign's internal affairs. The window from which Martinus, Slavata, and Fabricius were thrown is still there. It is pointed out to tourists visiting Prague Castle today. There is a small marker. There are guides. The approximately 70 feet of drop is still approximately 70 feet. The castle is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Payoff on the 2nd open loop the full pattern and where it ends. March 10, 1948. Jan Masaryk, Foreign Minister of Czechoslovakia, son of the country's founding president. His body was found in the courtyard of the Chernin Palace, below the bathroom window of his official apartment. The communist government, which had just completed a coup in February, declared it a suicide. Payoff on the 5th open loop. The word defenestration, where did it go after 1648? It went everywhere. The literal meaning, throwing someone from a window, became the source of the extended meaning, the forcible or summary removal of any adversary from any position. When a CEO is removed without warning. When a prime minister is ousted by their own party. When a tech founder is pushed out of the company they created. The vocabulary that reaches for these moments is defenestration. 3 men fell 70 feet and walked away, and the world needed a new word to describe what had happened. That word is now used in every language that conducts politics and fires people. Prague made it necessary. The 1419 defenestration started a 15-year war. The 1483 defenestration produced 31 years of peace. The 1618 defenestration produced the 30 Years' War, the Peace of Westphalia, the modern state system, and a noble title meaning Baron of Highfall. The 1948 defenestration, if it was won, produced a Cold War symbol and an unsolved mystery that Czech courts were still examining in 2004. The window looks like every other window in Hradčany Castle now. Stone frame. Medieval glass. 400 years of weather. You cannot tell from the outside which window it is. You need the tour guide. Inside, it is a room in a castle. The floor is still there. The walls are still there. The window opens the same way it opened on May 23, 1618 outward, over a 70-foot drop, onto the city that produced the Hussite Wars and the 30 Years' War and the word defenestration, and a secretary named Baron of Highfall.